Welcome to YouTube Developers Live. We have a great show today revolving around a new data API. We have the PM and the lead engineer here to talk a little bit about it, and we have a lot of questions for them. But before we get started, let me introduce everyone, including our guests. I'm Jeremy Walker. I'm part of the developer relations team here for YouTube, and we have Greg Schechtner. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing well. Don't throw any N's in my name. It's Schechter, but that's
Schechter.
all right.
Okay, sorry about that. Did you stay up late for the election or anything?
Well, I mean, in California, it kind of ended pretty early, so I didn't have to stay up that late to watch. But, you know.
Great. Well, we have Jeff Posnick from New York, and I suspect you probably had to wait in line for a while to vote.
Yeah, I tried to time things pretty well. So I voted right after work, and actually the line was not too bad at that point, but did definitely stay up a little bit past my bedtime to watch the results.
And then from Europe, we have our special guests. We have Raul Furnica. He's the lead engineer for the YouTube APIs. You there, Raul?
Hi, yeah, I'm Raul Furnica. I'm the tech lead of the YouTube API team.
And then we have Vlad Voskovic, who's the product manager.
Yeah, that's me. Hi.
Great. Well, we're really excited to have you guys on today. We have a bunch of questions just to talk a little bit about the API. For any of you out there that don't know, we did release a new data API version 3 for YouTube, and we just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So I guess our first question revolves around why did we rewrite the YouTube data API?
So I'll take this one to start. So the old API got a bit old. So after like 5 years for V1, 4 years for V2, we kind of thought that it's time to change it a bit, to make it more modern, introduce some new elements. So the old API was still based on the ATOM responses, and we thought that we needed some backwards incompatible changes. And we also then used the occasion to launch a bunch of really new cool features in the new API, like the topics API, universal search, and a bunch of technical improvements. And perhaps you can even go into them.
Yeah, so there is a lot that had to do with the bloated format in Atom and XML that we didn't like anymore in the old version 2 and version 1. And now we basically use JSON by default for the response format. We're also adding new features on the technical stack, like partial resources, which we're probably going to talk about it during the meeting today. We're adding new services that we never had, that already Vlad described. So it's all about new stuff that we couldn't do before, and we feel like it's about time we do now.
Yeah, so it's something we learned along the way, and we thought now it's time to use that.
Oh, great. And
Cool.
Would you guys mind giving a little bit more information on the infrastructure?
In particular, on infrastructure or API design, you can see a couple of changes into the responses and the request format. I would like to highlight a couple of things. One of them is the partial responses. So from now on, you basically can say whatever you need to request from the resources you retrieve from the API in a parameter called part. I don't know if actually people check the documentation already or not, but a video can mean many things, and a video can be a lot of information about recording location, or it can be about title and description, or it can be about the content of the video, or it can be about information about the video being in 3D or not, and so on. So a video means many things to many people, and we added a system to allow people to say what does the video mean for them, and retrieve the video parts that are interesting. So parts are logical groups of fields that you can specify in a request to retrieve. So part equals snippet would retrieve only the snippet of a video and not the rest of the information, which makes it good for the bandwidth and good for the API itself in terms of design and interface and cleanness.
Great.
Another thing that I would like to mention is the snippet. we have this approach right now in YouTube that we didn't have in version 2, and I wish we had there from the beginning. We think that every YouTube resource should have a thumbnail, to put it simply. So we have a part specially named snippet, which contains the title, a description, and thumbnails. And that part is available for any resource served by the YouTube API. So anything you would see in the YouTube API, you should be able to easily build a graphical interface with an image, with a thumbnail, and just show the user what this is about.
Yeah, that I noticed that really helped a lot, especially when you're doing certain searches, and it's really easy to get it and pull it up. I noticed it's an experimental. It has this experimental label. Can you guys talk a little bit about what that actually means?
Experimental basically means that we are not done yet. It means that we are still listening to feedback from the community, and if that feedback tells us that we need to change stuff, that we will consider changing stuff. So it just means that we are going to keep adding features and developing the API further. And so once we think that we are done, then we will remove the label.
Great. So let's say you're on V2, which quite a few people are. When should they start thinking about porting over? Should they port now? What would you say are the missing features from V3 or that are in V2 that are maybe not in V3 yet but are coming?
So that's what I was going to say. Or basically, we have a huge legacy to live up to. Basically, in version 2, we have a lot of features, and while most of it is going to make it back into V3 into a slimline version and like a very nice reworked API, not all of it is going to come back. So there's certain features where YouTube is not relatively interesting into right now. For like inbox, for instance, and messaging in between users is not something that we're going to prioritize very high on the features we're going to add in V3.
But eventually they make it just that as you said, they are low priority, right?
Yeah.
Because users are not using them.
Yeah. So right now we launched V3 with the core features, so that includes videos, playlists, and channels. And we keep adding to those. On the stuff we don't have yet, there is particular extensions we added recently, or by recently I mean in the last couple of years, to V2 about live that we don't have yet, and we will work on adding it. We have more about content discovery, so we have more about hidden charts and browsing in particular YouTube content, and we haven't had time yet to add it in V3. And I'm trying to miss anything. I think that's all it's from what we might keep you out. So.
One thing I wanted to add that isn't yet in version 3 is support for push updates or for smart polling. There are some version 2 developers who might be using PubSub, HubBub, or SUP for doing kind of like smart polling or push updates, and I'm saying this publicly to encourage the engineering team to prioritize that for V3 because I know that's something I'm really looking forward to seeing added.
It's a big supporter. We're looking into it.
Yeah.
Great. And
we have you on video. Now you're committed.
Yeah.
And don't forget, keep an eye on our blog and our Google Plus page so as we announce those features as they come out. So you guys talked a little bit about some of the features you're excited about. I think you mentioned topics and, partial responses. Do you guys want to give us a little bit more, share a little bit more of what's going on? I hear that universal search is pretty cool too.
Yeah. So topics is something we are really excited about. It's a completely new API. So basically we are making the link between entities and videos for the first time, so that people can do semantic searches on videos and get videos that are related, let's say, to Sacramento, the city, rather than Sacramento, the basketball team. So this is something that we really hope will help a lot of apps, discover, new content in a new way. The other thing that you just mentioned is universal search. So basically, it is also a feature that we are proud of. It is basically we are rethinking the search from ground up here. We are allowing you to search among all YouTube entities. So perhaps there is a channel which is more related to a search query than some videos. So universal search means that we will serve you results based on the search scores among all YouTube entities. You can always restrict them to certain, like only to videos or only to playlists or only to channels, but you can also just search altogether, and that allows us to serve you better results, and also allows you to make to write applications that use this feature. So on other things that Raul already went into it, we are really proud of some of the technical improvements, and you already went into it. You can say more if you want.
Yeah, I want to sneak in something. So I know there has been a top feature request on external Bugnizer, or like external bug list. We're gonna have a way to retrieve your subscribers. It's just like a simple thing, but it's there. And then we're gonna have a uniform way to work with a list of videos, which is gonna be through playlists. So you can retrieve user uploads through a playlist right now, and if anybody builds an application that is a playlist player, it's going to be able to handle any list of videos, basically. And one more thing that we haven't yet released, but we're looking into adding it really soon, is something that I need to add because it's super geeky and it's like an engineering thing. We want to support protocol buffers externally, and that's something I'm looking forward to see through and see external users use and just with that. So it's going to be basically binary serialized response format, which is much more effective and efficient than any text format, even better than JSON.
Oh, great.
That's very cool. I was actually wondering, if I have an app that's using the V2 API, do I have to worry about things getting deprecated in the future if I don't have time to commit to the V3 yet?
So it is like this. So certainly we are not going to announce the deprecation of V2 before removing the experimental label, and even after that we're going to give a long notice so that people have a lot of time. So you shouldn't, like if you have a V2 app, you shouldn't be worrying about porting it until 2015. Only after that we might deprecate V2.
Great. So I have another question. So in version 2, part of the API was the Insight API, which lets you pull analytics information. And now with the new version of the Data API, which is version 3, we now have also a separate analytics API. So can you talk a little bit about the relationship now that those have split?
Yeah, so you can say the two different APIs. You actually see them in the developer console as two different APIs, and you can register for each of them for your own app. And but they're actually built on the same technical stack right now, so they integrate very, very nicely. So you can use the same client library to query either of them. So you can have a cross query between the two APIs with the same client library without much of difficulty. The authentication would be the same. You would use the same user for the analytics API as you use for the data API. So there is a lot of integration just because basically it's on the same API interface.
Great. Yeah, it is. I had written a sample in both, and it's once you learn one, the authentication is the same. And also the new analytics API, you can get information back in JSON or CSV format directly. But we're going to talk more about that next week at our GDL, so make sure you tune in for that as well.
Cool. So one topic that I wanted to bring up and to jump in here, everybody who's watched some of the older episodes will know that I'm really into YouTube API quota issues, and I think I spent about 30 minutes on one of our previous week's shows talking about how Quota applies to version 2 of the API. But version 3 of the API is a complete rewrite. There's a different backend, and I wanted to just see what kind of Quota considerations people should take into account when they're developing against v3?
Yeah, so Quota is being reworked as well, and it's very well or tightly built into the partial requests and partial resources. So the more you request about a resource, the more parts you include in your request, the more quota you're going to pay for that request. That's something that we want to basically incentivize the external developers to be careful about the size of the response and only request the data they need. So that documentation today is actually listing out all the parts every resource has. So you can check out that a video has resources like IDs, snippet, content details, and so on. And the general idea is that the more you include, the more quota costs you incur. And you can say that normally if you retrieve a video with 5 resources, you would pay a quota cost of 10 out of the units you see in the API console.
Yeah, and I think we're a lot more transparent in general in version 3 about quota, which is something a lot of people have asked about in the previous versions of the API. So we do actually include some real numbers and help people make some calculations about how expensive their calls are and how many quota units they have per day by default and things like that.
Correct, and we're also making sure in the documentation we're putting information about how expensive each part is and which are the parts that you can really carry a lot because they're really super cheap to retrieve, and which are the ones that might be harder and more expensive to retrieve.
Cool. Okay, so Greg and Jeremy, if you don't mind right now, I was going to kind of take over the presentation a bit and switch into doing a live demo of showing off some concepts that are important to version 3 of the API. This is something that's going to be driven entirely from within the documentation, which is something I particularly like about version 3 of the API. And let me just make sure I'm choosing the right window. Okay, so hopefully folks can see my screen at this point. And what I have open right here is the live documentation for version 3. It's at developers.google.com/YouTube, and you can get from there to version 3 docs. And in addition to documenting all the different parameters that specific requests take, if you look down here at the bottom of the page, let me just reload that to make sure it's fresh, you see this try it section. And this is actually a live web-based request that you can make that will go directly against the production API. You'll see what your request looks like, and you'll see what the response looks like as JSON. So, even if you plan on, using a client library, maybe you're a Python programmer or, a Java programmer, even though your actual code won't necessarily look like this is a great way to try out requests, try, to see what the different parts include, try different parameters, and get familiar with the API before you actually, actively have to sit down and type out code. I think there's a common, not very productive developer pattern where you kind of type in some code, you run the request, you maybe sniff the output, or you take a look at the logging details of the output, and then you rerun the request, and that takes time.
Hey,
so
Jeff,
this is really cool.
Jeff, can you bump up your font a little bit? It's hard to see on the video, so if you could bump that up, that'd be great.
Okay. I'm bumping up the size of my screen.
Thank you, sir.
A little bit. Hopefully folks can see that pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to show, first of all, you could use OAuth 2 from directly within this tool, which is great. So you don't have to enter your username and password anywhere. You have the standard benefits of OAuth 2. And what I'm going to do is make a channels list call, and I'm going to specify the part content details over here. And I'm going to specify the parameter mine is true. And what this is going to do is we're going to return my own channel, the channel of the authenticated user. It's very similar to what the default user was in version 2 of the API. And it's going to give me some details about that channel. So I click execute down here. See that happen, and you see the response. So you see both what the actual URL is over here, and you see the response JSON in a nice, pretty printed format. And I'm going to walk you through something that's really common to do in version 3. So you kind of take playlist IDs that you might get from either the channels list over here, or you might get a playlist ID from doing a universal search or some other method, and then you take that playlist ID and you plug it into the playlist items.list method in order to get the contents of the playlist ID. So this is actually really great because everything is a playlist, as Raul mentioned, and the user uploads feed is also just a playlist. So I'm going to get my specific playlist ID for my uploads feed directly from this response. I'm going to copy it over here. And I'm going to go back up to playlist items list. And I get to use the live demo again over here. Scroll down to the bottom. So in this case, I'm going to ask for this snippet for each video. I'm actually just going to put in 2 results per page over here. And I'm going to put in as a playlist ID that user identifier that I got from my previous call. So clicking execute over here, I can see the response. I see some kind of metadata about the response feed. There's 4 results. They're showing me 2 results in this response. And you see the actual relevant details about the items that are in my uploads playlist. So in this case, you'll see some thumbnails. You'll see the title. You'll see the date that it was published, and description for those things. So again, regardless of whether you're dealing with a user uploads list of videos or a traditional YouTube playlist of videos, or the feed of all the videos that somebody has liked, all these things are treated exactly the same in version 3. So that really simplifies the type of code that you have to write. You don't have to kind of write special case code depending upon which type of list you're going against. So that's cool. I wanted to now also just show you how paging works in version 3. So similar to in version 1 and 2 of the API, we can't return every single video that might match a certain query within the same response. You might have an extremely large list of uploads, for instance, or a playlist might have up to 200 items. It's just really not very efficient to return all of that in the exact same response. So the way that was done in version 2 of the API and version 1 of the API was by using the start index parameter, and you could specify, the kind of the position within the list that you wanted to start at when you retrieved a specific request. That's done away with in version 3 of the API, and instead we make use of unique tokens, basically, that allow you to move backwards and forwards one page of requests. So you can't just jump to an arbitrary position within a list of videos anymore, but you can either go to the next page or the previous page. And in order to make use of that, I'm going to take this next page token value. I'm going to scroll all the way up here, and I'm going to put it in the page token variable over here. Click execute. You can see that the request URL changed a bit to include page token. And if you look at the response, it'll be the next 2 videos in the feed. So that's a really important concept to be aware of. Paging is one of the things that differs. Okay.
I was going to say one thing that I found really, really useful too is the fields section. You can. Mm-hmm. What I often found is I'd run a query with this, and then I'd figure out, okay, now I can pare it down to just the data I need, and then you can figure that out using that little link there, and you can check off exactly what you need, and then you can copy and paste that with the library so that you get the exact response.
A little daunting trying to come up with the correct syntax, but this does a great job of automatically generating it for you. If you do it from within the docs, you use the fields editor over there, and you can just get the snippets back, and in this case you will get rid of a few of the extra things. So I also wanted to cover something a little different, and this was something that Raul was talking about before, something he really liked, which was the support for different parts when making a request. And I'm going to do that by demonstrating a videos list request. videos list is how you get metadata for one or more different videos, and you could enter a whole comma-separated list of video IDs if you want. In this case, I'm just going to use that one video ID from my previous example. But I'm going to take a look over here and see the part parameter for videos list supports all these different details. So maybe what I'm most interested in is the player information about a specific video. I don't care about the statistics in my API call. I don't really care about what the topics that are associated with the video is. All I really care about is the player information. So that's something that I could explicitly request, and I won't get any extra data that I don't care about in response. That means it'll be cheaper from a quota perspective, and it also means that there's fewer bytes being transferred over the network. So the request should come back a little bit faster. So I did that over here. I put in part equals player, and you see I get every request is going to contain the ID. You don't explicitly have to ask for that to get the ID back. So I do see an ID, and I see what the kind of video it is. But the only extra thing I see here is player, and I get embed HTML. If I wanted to embed the standard YouTube player on a web page, I could use this iframe snippet to do it. And just to show you how that differs, if I switch this now to content details and click execute, I get, in this particular case, the content details for a video will give you the duration. So, this is a 5-second long video, and it's not either or. If I know that I need both parts, I can just put them in a comma-separated list, and I will get both of them back. So you really have fine-grained control over the amount of data that you get back. I also know that Raul and the engineering team is kind of happy that this makes it easy to add new data to the API in a very backwards compatible way. If we start exposing a whole new type of metadata about a given video, we could just create a new part for doing that. And nothing in the existing parts will have to change, and you can start requesting that new part if you're really interested. And finally, I wanted to demonstrate probably topic search. Although we did this before in one of our previous Google Developer Lab events that I wasn't able to join, unfortunately. But you know what? I'm gonna, instead of doing the topic search, I'm just gonna show universal search, I think. But definitely check out the previous week's episode that we dedicated to the topics API, because that's a really very interesting, topic. Pardon the pun. And I recommend folks look into that a little bit more. But I'm just going to show off quickly how you can do a universal search. And we're going to do it by scrolling down to the bottom over here. We'll get to the sample code in a bit. And if you try it, we're going to say we want snippet. We want query term of, let's say, New York. We're not going to put in a topic over here. Top type is where we get to specify either a video, a channel, or a playlist, but in this case, I want to return pretty much anything, and we'll let the API backend determine how to rank the results. So it might be a channel, it might be a playlist, it might be a video. I don't know what it's going to be in advance, and the API will put the most relevant things first. So you see that the first thing that it ends up returning is actually a YouTube channel for the New York Times. And the second thing that it will end up returning is a YouTube video for Jay-Z's New York State of Mind. And these are all mixed in to the results. And if you've ever done a search on YouTube.com, you'll know that you get something very similar. If you search for New York on YouTube, you'll get back a mix of playlists and channels and videos. And now you could have that same experience from within your own application. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, I think those are the main things I wanted to show for right now. But the important thing is that anybody could go to our documentation, read the docs, get familiar with the API, and then just scroll down a little bit to the bottom and instantly make their own calls and get familiar with the actual responses. So that's a real big improvement for developers, I think.
Thank you for that demo, Jeff. That was great. I was actually wondering if I'm like a developer and I'm trying to use this stuff, are there places for me to get help or maybe provide feedback because it still is experimental?
Yeah, absolutely. So a standard place to go for questions related to any of the YouTube APIs, and that certainly includes version 3 of the API, is Stack Overflow now. And we ask that anybody who posts questions on Stack Overflow use the tag YouTube-API, and that'll help us find their questions. We are also looking for feedback and kind of bug reports and feature requests and things that are not necessarily appropriate for Stack Overflow. So if you just have a general feature request or if you found a bug, we are using the same issue tracker that we've been using for a while now, and there's links to that directly from our documentation for both finding a feature request or reporting a bug. It would help us a little bit if you use the characters v3 somewhere in both your Stack Overflow or your issue tracker requests, just so we can help those things bubble up to the top a little bit. But we'll take a look at everything and we'll evaluate them as best we can.
Cool. I think we wrote a blog post on it too if somebody wanted more details on where the links are and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's on apiblog.youtube.com. You can find that.
Awesome. Are there examples available? I mean, other than the Explorer?
Yeah, definitely. So we are doing our best to keep up with the wide array of languages that all the developers out there are using, and we're kind of focusing on a few specific languages that we're writing samples for to begin with. So we have a decent number of Python samples right now. We have a good number of JavaScript samples, and thank you, Craig. I know that you've been the one primarily to do those. We're working on some Ruby samples, some Java samples that I think Jeremy's going to be adding pretty soon. And one of the nice things about the sample code is that it's also going to be in the documentation. So as you're viewing the description of a specific method and you're viewing the parameters and things like that, certain pages do have a section of the docs, and I scrolled past it when I was doing a search list method. I think that might have actually been the PHP example that we had in there for doing a video search. So you could kind of see everything within context. This is the parameter definition, this is some sample code for a variety of different languages, and down here is the live Explorer where you can play around with the API yourself. And in addition to those samples, we're also working on a few kind of like standalone applications to show people, more than just a snippet of code. This is a real-world application that was built, using v3, or in some cases, something that was written initially against version 1 or version 2 of the API, ported to v3, and show you what the process of porting it to v3 entailed. So, one example right now, the standalone application is the YouTube Topic Explorer, which we covered in the previous week when we talked about YouTube Topics. You could go out and watch our old episode for a link to that. And I'm personally working on porting both Party Playlist Picker and YouTube Direct Lite, which are two open source projects I wrote that are using both version 1 and version 2 of the API. I'm working on porting that to version 3 to try to, I guess, eat our own dog food to some extent, and also document what the process is for folks who are making that migration.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Jeff and Vlad and Raul. We have a couple questions we probably want to get to before we let you guys go, because I know it's late over there in Europe. Let's go through a couple questions.
Excellent. So one of the questions I see here is there was a switch between going from the XML to JSON with the v3 APIs, and one guy's just wondering about the libraries that are available to use that, and actually we've got some great tools. We have the Google Client libraries, which will do a lot of the API handling. They'll even deal with things like storing some of the authentication keys. And so you can find more information about that on developers.google.com. And all of the examples that we're building are using these client libraries. So those should be able to help you just sort of convert to using v3 and using JSON for these responses. The other thing is one guy asked about the different philosophy with the design and how V2 was doing this big data dump and V3 is just doing like the little pieces, and they wanted to know why. We covered that a little bit earlier, but I'm just going to reiterate. Basically, you're going to get less data, just the data you want, which means that the request is going to be faster, so it's going to be a lot more performant and not use as much bandwidth. And so that's good for you. If you're building your app, it's going to be faster, and it's good for us because it's just easier for us to handle greater loads when we're not sending as much bytes. The other question, best way to submit feedback, we already talked about that. There's a blog post on it at apiblog.youtube.com. And the last question, one of the other questions was somebody was wondering if the video to topics relationship is experimental. Not just the API, but they wanted to know if the relationship, or is that something that's sort of solidified? Are these things changing? I don't know if anyone can talk about that.
I mean, we're trying to improve our algorithms to determine that as we go. So we expect it to get better and better. I think it's already like really good.
Just to add to that, the feature itself, it's not experimental, so there is going to be topics for videos that's meant and integrated. The topics particularly that we associate with a particular video might change in time as our algorithms get better, but the feature is there to stay.
Yeah, actually we want to improve, to improve the feature. Currently we are serving the topics for the video, but we will add it for channels as well and for playlists in future. So it's there to stay. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, guys. And then the last question, which we see all the time, is YouTube and Google developer relations hiring? Jeremy, what's the answer to that one?
Yes, we are always hiring. So definitely check that out. If you go to developers.google.com /jobs, you should be able to see some listings. But we are definitely hiring. So if you are interested, check that out. I think that covers all the questions.
Yeah, that's all the questions we had today.
Great. So again, check out the new versions. Vlad and Raul, thank you so much for coming and answering some of our questions. And go out there and try it and give us feedback as soon as you can. Thanks.
I can just give last feedback, guys. We're really committed to this API. We are going to work hard to make it better and better. And one of the good things about the new API and infrastructure is that it will allow us to deploy features much faster than in the past. So expect a lot of new features coming out in
Yeah, I've been on the API team for 6 years, and this is the best API yet.
That's great to hear, yeah.
Past all Google, actually.
Great. Well, thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.